video accompanies the Mini Dinosaur range of crochet kits from TOFT, and they come in lots of different colours and 6 different designs. So let's just talk through what's inside your kit before you go and watch all the sewing up and any tips and tricks that you'll need at the end when you're putting them together. So inside your kit, you'll find 25 grams of pure wool double knit yarn in the colour of your choice. You'll also have your 3mm crochet hook. That is a soft grip hook, just to make it easier for you, not just to work the stitches, but actually to push the stuffing in using the handle at the end. You'll have your black eye thread for sewing your eyes and any nostrils on as well. Your stuffing, which is just about the right amount to finish off your dinosaur, included in there. And then just tucked onto the inside, you'll also find under that sticker your metal wool needle to help you sew it up. Then in addition to that, you've got your pattern, which is here on the front, a foldable pattern, and also an accompanying guide to all of the stitches. So inside here, you'll find all the abbreviations broken down, and you can watch videos separate to this one in order to watch each of those individual techniques too. So if you are new to crochet and you're learning how to do it for the very first time, then your best bet is to go and watch some of the beginner videos that will take you through all the basics. This video is really accompanying once you've made all the parts and you've crocheted them. This is the sewing up to put them together. Now, the last thing to mention, before you pop it into your recycle bin, is the cardboard box has actually been intentionally printed, covered in a crochet stitch, which the dinosaur is made in. So this is the British double crochet stitch printed on here in exactly the right size. So it means you're going to have a guide as you are learning to make your dinosaur to how big your stitches should be when you have completed your make. So whichever one you're making, I hope you thoroughly enjoy crocheting up your mini dinosaur using the following video as your guide. So once you've crocheted all of your pieces, pop your stuffing into the parts by using the tail end of your hook. So just push that down with the handle to put a little bit of stuffing into all the pieces. And then there are 2 ways of closing these off, and that'll depend on the body part that you're doing. So this is a body here. With a body the same as the front of the head, so you start the head from the back and it's the front of the face that's the opening. What you will do is gather the stitches. So to gather them, you take your wool needle and you do a little running stitch in and out like that. Then take your head, turning it upwards. So this is Anthony the Ankylosaurus, the mini Ankylosaurus that we're doing here. Turn it upwards like that, and then you're going to sew around between the head and the body to attach that into place. And this would be the same for all of the dinosaurs that have their heads and bodies in 2 pieces. The exception would be the Diplodocus, Dippy, who has the head and body as 1 piece because of that lovely long neck. So you sew right the way around the stitches like that, until that head is nicely attached. And you'll see that your body had a tummy at the front. So when you looked at your body shape, you've got a little tummy at the front there like that. That creates that lovely, cute shape of the dinosaur. So just make sure that your tummy is facing forwards when you sew your head on. Now to finish on an end, so once you've finished doing the stitches that sew them together, sew in through the body part, downwards from where you're sewing, and then just go around a stitch like that, back down, and around a stitch like that to finish them off. Now you can snip the ends as you go along, as I have done there, or alternatively you can leave all the ends in and then snip them all off at the end, whatever you find more satisfying. So when it comes to the limbs, so you've got 4 legs which are the same like that. What we're going to do is sew across the top in a flat line so that they're closed. So once you've finished off your leg, sew between the 2 rounds of stitches like that, and that will just sew those closed so that stuffing, the little bit of stuffing that you've popped into the end stays there, and you've just sewn those flat to close. And then we're going to sew these directly into the neckline. So turn your body to the side, your body and head to the side, place your arm in there like that. I say arm, an Ankylosaurus walks on all 4 legs, so it is their front legs effectively rather than the arms, but this style of dinosaur all sit up in a seating position, so you do tend to think about them as arms. So sew over one side, flip it over and sew the other one. There we go, and then we do the same for for the one on the other side. Then moving on to the bottom legs. So this time we're going to be attaching them onto the circle on the bottom of the body. So you see there, you've got your starting ring on the bottom of the body. What we're going to do is firstly sew the legs closed in the same way that you had done before, and then we're going to position them like that. So if you imagine that's the head and the top of the body, imagine this circle split into thirds. So you've got a line there and then two lines there, splitting that circle into thirds. We sew those legs on those lines that divide it into thirds like that. And that means that when it sits up, its bottom legs splay forwards, and you can just rest the top leg feet effectively on the knees of the other one, and it will sit up really cutely. So with your limbs all in place, it's now time to add the tail. Then we've just got the plate of armour and the finishing spikes for the Ankylosaurus. So this one does have quite a few more small parts compared to some of the other dinosaurs. The simplest one with the least sewing up is the Diplodocus, because that you're just adding your forelimbs and your tail onto your main body and head. So here we've got the tail. Again, I've stuffed it. So you see how the tail has got a small ball piece on the end of there. What we're going to do with this one is, rather than close it flat, we're actually going to sew it on in an open shape on the back of the body. So position your tail where you need it to be. My advice would be sit the project down and then position the tail, because then you'll know that you've got it in the right place, and that tail will help sit the dinosaur up as well. So hold that into place. If you're finding this difficult, you can always pin it first. So you could just use a couple of little blocking pins to hold it in place, but if not, you can just go straight in and sew around the edge. So go in through a stitch that then goes through the body and then through the stitches on the tail like that. And I'm going to back stitch around this one. So I'm going to go backwards into that one there, and then forwards through the body, up that tail stitch, and into that next one. So you run all the way around the edge of that tail, holding it open, and that will really then firmly secure the tail into position on the back of the body. You can always, if you find the back stitch a bit more fiddly, because we're actually sewing the same colour here, so the tail is the same colour to the body, you can always oversew it. So to oversew it would be the same way that we attach the arms on, that you just go between a stitch on the tail and between a stitch on the body. Actually, you'll get very similar results in this instance when you're sewing two of the same colour together. So in the same way as we did before, once you finish this piece, go through like that and secure that around a stitch. You can do that as many times as you wish to. There we go. Now let's add his spikes onto his head. So when you've made your spikes, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spikes. So in fact, let's put his tail ones on first as we practice how to do it, and then we'll add the ones onto the head. So I've already sewn in the end that comes from the tip of the spike, leaving just the base one behind. And I'm going to position these in either side of the ball on that tail, like that. And then just sew between the spike and the tail. There we go, and same for the other side.
Securing that end in the same way. There we go. Then onto the spikes for the head. So we need to put 2 on the top of the head, like that, and then 2 further down here, like that. So I'm going to put my 2 top ones in first. There we go, then down onto the final spike. Then the last thing to do is to sew his eyes into position. So that's me snipping off all the remaining ends. Get all those ends out of the way. And let's sew some eyes and nostrils into position. So for that, you're going to need some contrasting black eye thread, as you'll find in your kit. Bring that up into this position here, where you're going to put the first eye in, and just do a couple of wraps in and around a stitch like that. So 1, 2, and across to the other side. Use your rounds as a guide. So do you see how I've gone around 2 rounds there? My black wrap is around 2 rounds worth of stitches. 2, and then we can always put the little nostrils in on the front. And that is Anthony the Ankylosaurus, first one sewn up and completed. So now I'm going to do Dippy the Diplodocus. And this is working in TOFT teal. So on this one, you make the body and the head in one piece. So you start with the bottom of the body and you crochet all the way up to the top of the head in one piece. Stuff that and make sure that you stuff the stuffing in one piece as much as possible so that neck stands up nice and straight and firm. Then we're going to close off the legs in exactly the same way as we did with the Ankylosaurus. So just over sew the top closed like that. But what you've got to remember with Dippy is the fact that it has an extra long neck as a dinosaur. So you're going to be sewing on the arms halfway down the body like that. And just over sew between the top stitches like that. Flip it up and do the same on the bottom. Then to secure off that end, again in the same way that we do with the Ankylosaurus, go in and through and around a stitch. Right, so that's those 2 in position. Time for the bottom legs. So on this lovely long tail, instead of closing the end, you keep it all open. Watch the neck there, keep it all open, and you actually sew around the edge like that. And you can either do a back stitch or you can over sew. whatever you find easier. So a back stitch, you would go in and through like that. You'd come up a stitch in the tail, then you go back down a stitch in the tail behind it and into the body like that. Or to just over sew it together, all you would need to do is go in and through a stitch like that. There we go. And now it's time for some eyes and nostrils on our Diplodocus. So go in. If you get small bits of stuffing like that on the surface when you're sewing up, just take your scissors to them and snip those off like that. Down. And then 2 little nostrils to finish him off. And snip off all your ends, and that's Dippy complete. So once you've stuffed all of your parts, you will, in the same way as the others, have a body and a head and 4 limbs as well as the tail. But what's a little bit different about the T-Rex is it's got this split jaw in the head, and that's what will give it that kind of characteristic large-headed predator in terms of being a dinosaur and a carnivore. So what you need to do is gather the stitches on the front of the head in the same way. Like that. Do the same thing on the bottom one. And then you've got a choice as to whether you want to leave the jaw open like that. So it is open when you've got your finished dinosaur, or I'm going to tack mine slightly. So I've still got the larger top jaw, the smaller bottom jaw, but I'm going to tack mine slightly to keep it in a slightly more closed position than it is there. So close off the end of that. And then just to seal this off, I'll come in and through and just sew a couple of times through that underneath. So like that, and then back down and like that. And that will just mean that the head sits slightly more closed, but you'll still see a defined jaw between the 2 pieces. If you wanted to, you could fully close off that jaw like this by doing stitches between the top and the bottom all the way around. The choice really is yours. I'm actually going to, I think, put a few more stitches on the front of there to keep that closed. Okay, and finish that off. So then we've got our body. Position that into place on top of the body like that to see how the body's tummy is facing forward. And this is using TOFT green. This is Gregor the Mini T-Rex in TOFT green. There we go, so that's our body and head together. Then you've got the bottom legs, which are the larger ones. And we're going to sew those on as we did with the other dinosaurs. So close them off first so they're flat. And then you're going to use that thirds lines on the bottom. So we've got a straight line at the middle, and then we divide the bottom circle into thirds. So that's those bottom legs into position, the larger ones. Then for those characteristic T-Rex little arms, you've got these 2 little ones instead, and we're going to put those onto the front like that. So with these, you will have an end that comes off the chain that you'll need to sew in and through. Let me just pop that back through there. When you're making the pieces, do try and leave yourself a longish end on them so that then you'll find it easier to sew them off at the end. Okay, pull that through and through there like that. Then what you can do with the one that's on the end of the ball, effectively, that becomes the hand, gather the stitches together with that one. And then you can sew in and back and through. Like that. Then sew these into position on the front of your T-Rex like that. See how they're shorter and they're in position as those little characteristic T-Rex arms. Then I'm going to snip off my ends before we add on the tail. So that's the last piece that we'll be sewing into position. Then it's just eyes and nostrils to finish him off. There we go, tail in position. Let's add the eyes. Now the T-Rex has the eyes on the side of the head more, so you're best to turn it to one side like that. And it is quite a big eye, so let me try that again. Bring that in. There we go. Put a couple of nostrils in here. So bring that wool needle through the front. There we go. Snip off all your ends, and that is our Mini T-Rex complete. So this next one's going to take a little bit longer to make because we're going to be working some actual stitches onto the back to create the spines on the Stegosaurus. So this is his head. I'm going to close that off first, just by gathering stitches in the same way that we've done before. Same thing on the body. I've obviously stuffed all of these first as well. Gathered those stitches. And then positioning the head on top. And Stanley's head is this shape here. So you see how you've got a curve going downwards like that? This is the bottom of the head there. So your curve will go downwards on the head. So that's the head going on to the body like that. So do some stitches across the back of the head and then turn around and do some underneath the chin. And you see how I've got the tummy of my dinosaur facing forward? There we go. Right, now let's put some limbs into place. And sew the arms or the front legs into position first. Sew the tops closed. Into the gap between the head and the body. So one side. And then the other side. Now it's time to sew the tail on. So stuff the tail and leave the tail open. Pop that into position on the back of the dinosaur. Right, then once you've finished sewing on the tail and the limbs, the head of the Stegosaurus, we're going to add spines, so that are the plates that go right the way down that back. And to do that, you'll need a crochet hook, your crochet hook that you used before to do your main stitches, and you'll need your yarn. So let's first do the 2 spikes on the end of the tail so you can see the theory of what you do. So you put your hook in through a stitch like that. So in through a stitch on the tip of the tail, you yarn over, chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're actually going to work back down those stitches on the chain. So you go in and slip stitch, double crochet, slip stitch, and then slip stitch back into the tail. Then you can sew in those ends. Then on the other side, do the same thing. So go into the fabric like that. 4 stitches, slip stitch, double crochet, and slip stitch. And then you slip stitch back in to the fabric like that. Snip that off, and then all you will do is sew in those ends. So now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're going to work 8 of them down the back. So I'm going to start from this shoulder. If you think about the back, that's the back of the dinosaur. I'm going to start from this shoulder here by putting my hook in and around like that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slip, DC, and slip. And then this time round, we're not going to break the yarn and work them all individually. We're actually going to work them all in one continuous line. So put your hook in and slip stitch 1, and then go back in around the next round down like that and slip stitch 2. And that means that you've moved away from where you've done that spike. So you've done 1 here, you'll do 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there as we go back down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, slip, DC, slip, then you go in and do 1, and then in again and do 2. So then we're off again on doing another one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, slip, DC, slip, then we're just going to go onto the top of the tail here. So the fabric might get quite thick when you go to this point, but you'll still be able to get your hook in. So I've done one slip there. I'm going to go one down again. So they'll just be on the top of the tail, these last ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1. And then slip into place there. Now I'm going to break the yarn and then come back up the other side. So I've broken the yarn, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spikes on the back like that. I'm going to break that yarn, and then I'm actually going to start from the base this time, and I'm going to work back up towards it. And the reason why I do that is because when we've been doing all the other stitches, we've got a right side and a wrong side, but we're always working in one direction. But with this, because we've crocheted in one direction, the right side is here and the wrong side is here. And that's what causes them to curve over like that. And I want to make sure that they curve in the same way on the way back up. So they'll curve outwards in the same way. And that's why I'm going to come back up on the opposite side, but from the bottom up towards the top. So I'll get that curve that runs in the same way up the back. So slip stitch in, 1, 2, 3, 4, slip, DC, slip, slip stitch into position, and then slip stitch again to move up the back of the body. Just got my end in the way there. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And sew in your ends and then put on the eyes. When I've got two ends like this at the bottom of a slipped chain, all I will do is put both through the needle at the same time like that. They're all actually very secure anyway, these ones. It's not that they will come free, but I'll just go around one stitch like that and through and off. Time for the eyes. And two tiny little nostrils on the front. And that is your Stegosaurus complete. Right, on to the pterodactyl. So the very different thing about the pterodactyl is the fact that we're then going to crochet backwards and forwards between the arms and the body to create the wings. So first we sew the front of the head closed. So So that is the front of your pterodactyl's head like that. So it creates that shape from the side. Now each dinosaur only takes 25 grams of yarn, and so you can always, once you've got the pattern, you can always remake them in different colors, or buy one or more kits and then you'll be able to actually mix your colors too, if should you wish. So you'd be able to, they all come from that 25 grams, so it means that you would be able to buy 2 kits and you might decide to do your T-Rex in yellow and your Stegosaurus in orange, say, should you decide to mix and match your colors. So that's the 2 longer arms going into position on the pterodactyl. So that's those 2 long ones from which we will then work to form the wings in between those. And then the bottom ones are the short legs. So you've stuffed and sewn up your pterodactyl. Now it's time to make her fly. Let's crochet her wings. So what we're going to do is we're going to crochet backwards and forwards between the arm effectively and the body in order to put these wings in place. So take the arm upwards and the body downwards. I find easiest to start, and put your hook in like that around the armpit. Slip stitch into place and then chain 3. And then slip stitch into the other side of the arm like that. And this is just going to give us a nice starting chain. So now you can actually double crochet around this chain 3 times. So 1, 2 and 3, and that'll give you a lovely place to start from. When you pull those ends tight, it will close up that hole, so you won't always have a little hole under her arm. Slip stitch into the body. And then we're going to work back along, crocheting into those 3 stitches. So then you turn and you're going to crochet directly into the stitches that we just put onto there. So 1, 2 and 3, and then slip stitch into the arm. And then turning back on yourself, we're now going to start to increase every other round to make these wings get longer. So we're going to go double crochet 1, 2, and then 2 into next stitch. And then slip stitch into the body. And then we're going to do a normal row with no increasing. So that'll be working 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then slip stitch into the arm. But you need to, when you're slip stitching into the arm, make sure you miss one and go in there so that we eat those stitches up along that arm faster than we do the body, because the arm is longer than the body. So then turn again, and this time we're going to be doing an increase. So 1, 2, 3, So continue to follow that pattern of increasing until you end on 10 stitches across there. Then we'll do the same on the other side. So 1, 2, and then on the one that's close to the arm, you do an increase. So 3 and 4, then miss a whole round out and attach itself 1 down. So there we go. So then back along, no increasing on this one. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then slip stitch into that next stitch along. Turn again. Now we're going to be on an increase row again. So 1, 2, 3, and then an increase in this one. So that'll make it 4 and 5. Miss one, slip stitch in there. Back down towards the body, no increasing on this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Slip stitch in there. Now you're aiming for to meet your leg, so just do keep eyeballing where the top of that leg is as you're doing it. So now we're on an increase one again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Miss one. Back down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And an increase one again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And in again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Then one last return, so we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Slip stitch in to meet the top of the leg where you've sewn that in, and then we're doing one final increase and a slip stitch back in to meet the hand on the other side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then an increase in this last one, 9 and 10, and then slip stitch into position next to the hand. Now it's just time to add the tail and the eyes. So sew in all of the ends. Pull them nice and tight under the arm so it closes up those chain 3s that we did at the beginning. Then let's add the tail. Time for her eyes. And that's the pterodactyl finished. Now, time for the final one in the Mini Rainbow Dinos collection. That is Victoria the Triceratops. So we've got Victoria in pink, and this is the Triceratops. So gather the stitches close on the front of the head. So to work Victoria the Triceratops's frill, what we're going to do is actually to work it directly on here. If you find this difficult, you could always work it separately and then sew it on. And if you want to do that method, you just need to chain 15 and then work the 15 stitches backwards and forwards. But if, like me, you'll always take the opportunity to avoid some sewing up, let me show you how you do it directly onto the head. So identify the centre of the head like that. And then you can use your sewing up needle as a marker just to put that in place. And then we need to come 7 stitches away from that to identify that being the centre of the head to put these 15 stitches on. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're actually going to slip stitch in down here with our hook. So you put your hook in like that down there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch traverse 15 stitches all the way across to the other side. So yarn over like that, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and on your 7th one you should be in around the centre of the head like that. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Now what you need to do then is we're going to work backwards and forwards on these 15 stitches, double crocheting into them. So you turn and you're going to work that one there. So you actually lose one and go down to 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So once you've done your 5 rows of going backwards and forwards on those 15 stitches, what we're now going to do is chain 1, 2, 3 stitches and then slip stitch back down that chain. So 1, 2, and then into the next one along. So 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2. 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 So for the finishing touches, we're going to add the horns. Down like that. So she's got one smaller horn that sits on the front of her nose here. So there's the one on the centre of the nose, and there's 2 slightly longer ones that sit either side of the frill. So have a look at your frill like that. Pop that into place there. I'm actually going to come one up into there. So when you're adding things like horns, just always make sure you just eyeball things like the distance from there to there and there to there to make sure that your features are as symmetrical as possible. Right, then sew in all of these ends that will make these horns really nice and neat. Then we'll add her eyes. Then just sew with your end on your frill. Just use the end that you've got on either side to sew in through the base of the frill like that, and pull that tight, and that will just create that lovely shape on the edge of the frill. So sew through there, and you're just sewing the tip of where you work that edge back on, and that will just pull all the stitches together to make it stand off the back of the head in a really attractive shape. So same, your ends on the other side. On this side, it's on the bottom of the head. Grab that together and bring that up through the top. So it's the opposite way around we did, but using both ends on both sides, and that will just pull that close so that frill sits really nicely off the back of the head. Secure that into place. Final two ends to go in here. There we go, so nearly complete. Now just that finishing touches of those eyes. And that's all 6 of the mini rainbow dinosaurs sewn up, ready to go off to new homes. So you've got your Triceratops, your Ankylosaurus, your Pterodactyl, Stegosaurus, T-Rex, and of course the Diplodocus.